Stuart's giving a few words.
Good, nice to see you.
Do you want me to just open it and then hand it to you, or do you want to start it as the Jeff?
Up to you.
Go ahead, yeah.
Is this on?
Okay. English 1, French 3, 5. Claude, let me just make an announcement. Are we ready? Can you hear me? I can't hear me. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Just for interpretation purposes, English is 1, French is 3, and Spanish is 5. Inglés 1, Francés 3, y Español 5. 5. Okay, go ahead, Claude.
Testing. Can I stand up?
You can do whatever you want.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Claude Gascon. I'm the head of the programs unit at the Global Environment Facility, and it's a pleasure for me to say some opening remarks and welcome you to this very important GEF and IUCN and CI side event on the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. When we talk about environmental stewardship and environmental stewards, obviously we can't do that without putting front and center the Indigenous peoples and local communities' role as being environmental stewards. By any number, they are and have a disproportionately positive impact on the stewardship of lands, the stewardship of water, and the stewardship of biodiversity and carbon stocks for that matter. They represent about 5% of the world's population, and they manage over 25% of the land surface of the earth. Within that, in fact, they have even a more disproportionate impact on the protected areas, managing a little over 40% of the world's protected areas. And if you look at the global biodiversity importance of those lands, it represents about 80% of the global biodiversity. So you can see that 5% becomes amplified, and the importance of Indigenous people and peoples and local community is very, very significant. Within the GEF, we've recognized that, of course, and since the beginning, we have had projects that have involved and engaged IPLCs. We've had obviously some do no harm policies in our environmental and social safeguards. But it was quickly pointed out to us by our wonderful Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group over the years that that was good, but it was really not enough. And we needed to really focus on Indigenous peoples and local communities, organizations, and their leadership around the world if we were really to move ahead with the agenda on global biodiversity. And so our IPAG worked with us over the past 10 years to the point where in GEF-7, about 6 years ago during the negotiations, we were able to include a set-aside pot of money, 25 million, which was earmarked for the Inclusive Conservation Initiative that we launched in GEF-7 with CI and IUCN as lead agencies. This program now is in 9 different countries, and you're going to hear today a lot of very, very important and interesting examples of how these resources are getting used. The program has 4 different components. To increase or enhance the management of lands that are managed by IPLCs, the strengthening of institutions that are managed and governed by IPLCs, also ensuring that leadership of Indigenous peoples and local community organizations are represented at these kind of events and other type of significant global policy events, and finally, sharing lessons learned among these different organizations so that we can continue to build successes. With that, I will hand back, but just to say that we are also pleased that in GEF-8, the new cycle of replenishment that just completed and was launched on July 1st, we have another set aside of 25 million that will be used for a phase 2 of the Inclusive Conservation Initiative, which we hope will be as successful as what you're going to hear today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Claude. So my name is Kristen Walker-Painemia, and I'm Senior Vice President for the Center for Communities and Conservation at Conservation International. So I'm going to be your facilitator, facilitator, moderator over the next little while to talk about and hear about inclusive conservation. But I first want to pass the baton over to Stuart McGinnis, who's Deputy Director of Programs at IUCN, to give us a few reflections on finance related to Indigenous peoples and local communities.
Thanks very much, Kristen, and thank you, everyone, and thanks for being invited to participate on what is a very important event. I think what my reflections are, not so long ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, in an event like this, we would have been focusing solely on safeguards, and solely on safeguards, and of course that is important, ensuring the rights and that rights are recognised and respected, and that there's meaningful redress around those rights. All that's important, and the challenge still remains. There are still too many environmental defenders who are in harm's way, but I think, as my old friend Kenyinki Sena used to say, you can't chop rights. It's about building on rights for something else. It's agency, and I think that's the exciting thing with the ICI, is about it's really now looking into tapping into and empowering the agency of Indigenous peoples and local communities, really making sure that there is that, and to make sure that agency can be recognised and supported, is it comes back down to making sure there is directly, and I emphasise directly, accessible resources, not resources mobilised or mediated through a third party or an agency, but resources that get into the hands of communities of Indigenous peoples, where they can build on their rights, build on the recognition of their rights, but then actually use their knowledge, their stewardship to actually deliver what are the priorities. I would like to really congratulate Jeff, because I think this to make this move now to say we've got to move into a new way of doing business. We can't have this old sort of grant-based mobilisation of resources through third parties, indeed through organisations like IUCN. We need to be able to move that through into the hands of those who are actually responsible for delivery. And again, I think, Claude, I'd say that this is transformative. We're going to hear lots of exciting examples today of just how this is transforming lives, transforming opportunities, securing natural resources. But I'd also say, I think, Kristen, it's also transforming organisations like CI and IUCN as well. It's challenging us to think, what is our role? How do we actually make sure that we're there to support, but not there to as a mediator, that we're not there to dictate or to put in place our own KPIs. It's working. It is coming to this whole idea of really now empowering the agency and recognising the agency of communities. I think in conclusion, I would say we can't make the excuse any longer that we don't understand, because we do understand. We understand that 80% of global biodiversity is stewarded by Indigenous peoples. We understand that something like 250 gigatons of CO2 is stewarded on Indigenous people's lands. We understand that deforestation rates are 20 times less on Indigenous people's lands than elsewhere. It's a question now of belief, and really belief in the stewardship and the agency of Indigenous peoples and local communities, that there is the effectiveness of their delivery, and being able then to match that actually with directly accessible resources. Sorry, that's my phone. So in conclusion, I would say I think the Inclusive Conservation Initiative is a start, and it's a good start. And again, thanks to GEF for that. But it is only a start. At this day and age now, it's not acceptable anymore that only 1% of resources are going directly to communities. And there's a lot of discussion here at the minute about finance and new finance and finance mechanisms. I'll say this here. If the questions aren't being asked, are these new mechanisms including or excluding? Are there new barriers being put up for communities? Then it's not good enough. Innovative finance that is not inclusive should be considered as being no longer good enough. So thanks very much.
Great, Thanks, Stuart. Just for those of you who have joined us recently, we do have interpretation equipment here. You need to just drop your badge off and they'll hand it over to you, because we will have speakers in other language. So I want to turn to Lucy, because I think, we heard from Claude about sort of the journey that the GEF has had working with an Indigenous advisory group, which is known as the IPAG. And Lucy Mulenkei, you yourself are a leader. You have been steadfast for many years here in the CBD. You're currently co-chairing the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Biodiversity. And you yourself, along with other members of the Indigenous Advisory Group, have been pushing for this issues of direct finance. So I want to talk a little bit about the journey that the IPAG and the negotiation. I want to congratulate the GEF, but I also want to congratulate the IPAG, because it is a joint discussion that has to happen. So Lucy, I want to hear from you and the journey that has gotten us here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And
there you go.
it will come. Okay, there you are. So I would like to thank you all, and I hope my voice will come out, because there is competition here of who is louder than the other. You can hear from all over, but it's really great to be here. And one of the most important things is to thank GEF, a Global Environment Facility, Claude and the team there, and the Secretariat, because we took a journey. It was a long journey. When we came over to IPAC and we started discussing about different issues, one of the items that we had put in place was finance. How do we get access funding for Indigenous people? Because every time we used to discuss with the Indigenous people, I personally have been in touch with GEF for a long time with a small grants program and also being able to attend to different meetings. So when we selected and when we decided that we wanted to focus on the issue of ensuring that Indigenous people get funding, we all discussed in the meeting, and we decided we develop a white paper that can go around and we can discuss with our Indigenous people, and we can move around and see how this white paper would be accepted and also input from Indigenous people, and then we see where we can lead to. And I remember the white paper was one of the most challenging things because Indigenous people said, no, Jeff, they won't give us money. They will tell us to go to the small grants program. They will not give us money. But we were, as IPAC, the team, Indigenous People Advisory Group, we were determined. And I really was determined that something will have to come out of that. And since I'm a positive thinker, I had to keep on pushing. Luckily enough, also the IPAC had elected me as the chair of the group. So I kept on motivating so that we can all motivate each other and continue working and making sure that this succeeds. So during the council meetings, we brought these issues up. And those who have attended the GEF Council, it's something that you have to convince them and something that you have to continue discussing and let them know that exactly this is very important for Indigenous people. Thanks to the Secretariat, because they also helped us to put every discussion that we wanted into the perspective and for the council members to accept it. And I remember it was a whole other process. Up to the time we had, I think, the last meeting in Costa Rica, where I was just alone there at that point, and I was thinking, shall we ever get this money or not, you know? But we were able to get this particular funding, and having 25 million allocated to Indigenous peoples is something that we were not even believing. And I'm sure some people up to now, some of them may not believe. But until now, when we have this particular process again, and thank you to IUCN and CI, because we also had to go to a process to select one of the, GEF agencies who could be able to manage and to work with the Indigenous people closely, to guide them and to be able to help them to see how they can, we can get the real projects and also how to implement and so on. So I want to thank you again, because it was a long journey which also made you change the perspective, try to see how you're going to take it and how it's going to move forward with the help of GEF. And you have done quite a lot of trainings, a lot of meetings we've had. It's not been very easily, it's not something that you can say it came just on the table, here is the money, take it and go, no. And it's still not, that my colleagues, let me also warn you, it's still not. Because all the trainings that you've had, all the work that you are going to do is going to be something that is going to be very, very important for Indigenous people. Not only your organization, but for Indigenous people generally. It's also going to be a very big impact for CIA and also for IUCN to be able to see that there is that success and that Indigenous people can be able to manage those funding on their own. And GEF will also be able to increase that funding every other time. We are so glad also, we didn't have to struggle a lot for GEF 8, because already there was a clarity there that IPAC was still working with the whole team. We haven't stopped working together. They still consult us, and we still work together with the GEF Secretariat. Sarah is the one who is our main contact person there. Claude is part of us, and he continues to listen to what we say. So as we say, discussion, openness, and being able to talk together is very, very crucial. So this journey has been long, Kristen, but it's something that we are looking forward to. And I want to also tell the recipient and the grantees that please take it as a serious issue, step by step, and be able also to keep on consulting, keep on talking to each other, and keep on sharing, and let it be a success, because that success will guarantee the second phase, the third phase, and the fourth phase for the others who are coming. So I think that's what I really want to bring to the attention of the rest. And once again, thank you very much, Jeff. We will not leave you. IPAC is still there and will still continue asking more and more to ensure that we have a bigger population. And we also want to add IUCN and CI to also see how they can also fundraise and have other funding that could be complementary to the ones that we already have, because it's very important to have complementary funding to help here and there. Because as you go to the field, there are always emerging issues which have not been budgeted. So to have extra funding is very, very important. Thank you very much, all. And I want to wish everyone good luck. And I'm sitting here to listen to the good news and the people who are already granted that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lucy. I'm on, right? And thank you for your wisdom, but I also still continue to hear a challenge to the GEF. You didn't have to struggle as much with GEF-8, but I hear you want more in GEF-9. And I hear you want CI and IUCN and others to continue to step up on the fundraising piece, so I think that's important. So I'd like to invite Claude and Stuart to step down. Lucy, you can stay. Why don't you stay? I would like to invite Sarah and Luis to come up. So we have Sarah Wyatt here also with the GEF, who works very closely with the Indigenous Advisory Group and Conservation International and IUCN. And we have Luis Barkin, who is working with ICI on behalf of Conservation International. So Sarah, I also, given the fact that you are in the middle of the IPAG and the agencies, talk a little bit about this journey and the experience and the thought that had to go behind pulling this together. Still not on.
This one? Okay, there we go. So thank you, Kristen, for that introduction. And yes, so I work most directly with the IPAG, and it really is such a privilege to do that work and to support their guidance to us. The IPAG is about much more than the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. So for the GEF, this is an advisory group that provides us both formal and informal guidance on many different topics as we attempt to design our programs and everything that we do in ways that are supportive of Indigenous peoples, reflect the realities of IPLCs and their needs in what we're doing. So Stuart mentioned safeguards, and that's, having things like free, prior, and informed consent as a requirement of GEF projects, as well as an expectation to do good through our projects, not just do no harm. So all across the whole GEF portfolio, that is an expectation when it comes to any project. And then we have our small grants program, which we've already heard reference to. But unfortunately, our small grants program, which is great, and in countries where there are Indigenous peoples, about 40% of small grants program projects go to Indigenous peoples. While that's great, that's $25,000-ish a pop. It is helpful, but it is far from enough, and not enough to really build capacity over time to receive the resources that they deserve. You've heard some facts and figures, but I'll just note that 70% of global forest carbon is located on community lands, and the GEF is responsible for also serving as a financial mechanism for the UNFCCC, but also that Indigenous peoples often lack the legal recognition of their lands and territories. And in particular, what was striking to me, there was a WRI report that showed across 15 countries that it can take Indigenous peoples often a decade or more to claim their territories. Meanwhile, in extractive industries, large-scale agriculture, they can often get permits within a week or a few weeks or 3 years, much faster than Indigenous peoples who are protecting their own land. So when all of that is said, there is a very large gap between who is receiving the resources for doing the work and who is actually doing the work. I would say that less than 1% of climate aid actually goes to Indigenous peoples. And so recognizing that, and recognizing that the GEF, with how we were born out of these kind of negotiations, our main interlocutor is the government. And the governments of countries. And that is what it is. And it can be challenging to ensure that Indigenous peoples actually receive the attention and support that they deserve. And so with all of that in mind, we developed the Inclusive Conservation Initiative and worked very closely with our IPAG at every step of the process in order to select the agent, design the initial project, select the agencies we would work with. Then we had a workshop I guess that was right before the pandemic, basically. We had a workshop together with the agencies to start designing the concept and then going out. I mean, it was a routine and regular thing. And the other thing to point out is that this does take time. And we were able, through the structures that we tried to come up with to do this, we were able to find that time and to provide the support that was necessary. So I think that is a bit of our journey.
Thanks, Sarah, for that reflection. And Sarah and Lucy both participated as part of the interim the steering committee of the project design, along with 3 other Indigenous leaders who are also guiding us in that process. So I'm going to pass it over to Luis Barquin, who works with Conservation International, to talk about what the project is, what the initiative is, and then maybe we'll have a few insights from both Lucy and Sarah on that front.
Thank you, Kristen, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Luis Barquin. I'm going to share a brief overview of the GEF-7 Inclusive Conservation Initiative. Like our colleagues share, all this history and this process has been a process that is sparked and catalyzed by the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group that also go through the selection of IUCN and Conservation International as the GEF implementing agencies, and that it is supporting the GEF-7 allocation of $25 million for IPLC-led conservation efforts. The project is organized in 4 main components. The first component is where most of the resources, about 80% of the resources, are concentrated on investment for direct support for activities on the ground and direct support for Indigenous peoples and local community organizations. This is a portfolio that consists of 9 initiatives in 12 countries. And then there is activities at global level, which is a global component consisting of components 2, 3, and 4. The second component is focused on capacity building, exchanges, dialogues, and also fellowships. And a third component of building and supporting Indigenous peoples and local community leadership at the international environmental policy arena. And last but not least, the fourth component, which is focused on inclusive conservation knowledge to action, how to keep deepening the field of inclusive conservation, how to also learn more, gather all the lessons learned, and also build a community of practice where all the lessons learned of this process can help keep us improving and simplifying the processes of how to make better and improve the direct access of GEF and multilateral finance for Indigenous peoples and local communities. What makes ICI different? I think we heard many points earlier from the previous interventions, but a few points also to highlight. First, the catalyst element of the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group of the GEF, how this sparked a concept and made possible the direct access of GEF finance for Indigenous peoples and local community organizations, a key aspect to highlight. The second element is also the element of Indigenous people and local community-led projects, portfolio of activities, and the role of IPLC organizations playing as executing agencies role in this portfolio. And another element to highlight is the governance element, which ICI had and has a steering committee of Indigenous peoples and local community leaders, giving direction, strategy, and also leadership to the whole initiative throughout the whole life of the initiative. So this was a process that's been long, that also started with a request for expressions of interest during the pandemic. And despite the pandemic, we received more than 400 applications from 80 countries. You cannot believe the quality and the value and the reflection of the demand for direct access to climate and biodiversity finance is this element of all these expressions of interest received, and also conducting a process we form a technical review committee consisting of Indigenous experts, but also experts on other conservation fields, to support on the selection of the final initiatives that were also selected by an interim steering committee, and that resulted in a portfolio for GEF-7 Inclusive Conservation Initiative of 9 initiatives in 12 countries. The initiatives are in Guatemala, in Panama, Peru, Chile, Argentina, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Kenya, Thailand, Fiji, and the Cook Islands. And Nepal. And we're gonna learn more, thank you, Sarah. We're gonna learn more about these initiatives in the next section of this panel. But it's just a reflection of how diverse, how different landscapes, territories, governance systems, activities, and approaches to enhance IPLC-led conservation are gonna be part of this phase. And well, this part of how we are transforming conservation funding and practice as a two-way street, no? A way that is an opportunity to transform conservation finance and practice, also keep doing innovations of how direct access works and can and needs to be simplified, and also reimagining how we can communicate impact beyond the traditional elements of hectares, carbon, and global environmental benefits. But this is an opportunity also to learn more of how this is going to help inform donors and the international community about other aspects that could tell the story about IPLC-led conservation in terms of cultural indicators and other aspects that can help us reflect at a common level results frameworks that are informed in terms of climate and biodiversity goals. So thank you, Kristen, and back to you.
Thanks, Luis. So before we switch over to hear from the projects themselves, I did want to, and I highlight that Luis highlighted that there's 9 initiatives in 12 countries, and both of you were part of the committee, and obviously Luis was part of the technical team, but I think the importance and the discussion you had about having a balanced portfolio. Maybe just some reflections on that, Lucy, in your role globally as an Indigenous leader, but also Sarah from the GEF. Obviously, the end result of the GEF is to deliver global biodiversity targets, right? But also we want to create transformation. Just maybe a little bit of reflection on that.
I think when we were also selecting that, we were very careful, and we also were looking very keenly to see the applications which already had been shortlisted. And as you had Luis say, 400 shortlisting them, and they were all really wonderful, was not very easy, and also was not very easy to read all the details that were needed. And of course, with the after shortlisting and looking at the different projects, we were also looking at to make sure that we have a balance, that the ones we select are also organizations that we know they can be able to, it's something that already what they have indicated and what they have put in the application is what is going to be done. And looking at the communities and looking at the countries and trying to balance all that. And I think for us, it was quite good to, the projects that we selected were the ones we found perfect. And we also found that this is a balance, quite a balanced way, looking at Latin America, looking at Asia, and looking even to make sure that we also look at the Pacific and not leave any, in the 7 regions of our geographical regions, we did not want to leave anyone behind. We ended up looking very keenly on that. And some of the regions, it was quite difficult to know exactly who are we going to select because they were all perfectly good. But at the end of the day, we all agreed that what we selected was our best, and we still hope that this can be implemented and it will make a big difference. We also look at the different ecosystems. We look at the drylands, we look at the wetlands, and we look at the forest areas. And that's why, like for Africa, you find that the drylands kind of dominate, especially in the East African region. And then in the DRC Congo, we have the forest area. So we try to balance that way. And then in the other regions also, we looked at the different ecosystems to make sure that at least we can reach out to as many. And we are looking forward to hope that it will change the whole also the ecosystems that are already existing. And it will also involve quite a number of people. And we're also seeing that there will be enough, there will be more capacity enhancement in all these particular, not only to the organization, but also to the communities that are going to be involved. The other biggest challenge, which was also there, was about the governments approving and agreeing to these projects. It was not easy because you already have an application approved, but you have to go back to your government for them to tick it right. And these are the issues that were being brought up by Indigenous people, that why do we have to go to government because this is our own projects and so on. But then this is a policy and a regulation for GEF, so we had to follow that also. But I think this was also a lesson learned, and also for the governments, they have to look at it and see that despite the fact that we have these communities, we really don't have to deny them the right to, because they are also bringing development, and they are bringing the work that they are doing some activities and work that them as government cannot be able to do it. So those are some of the issues that I found quite challenging at times, but also very important that we experience such challenges, and they were well treated and well managed. And I also want to say that GEF also helped a lot to look at the council members and trying to see how they could help in terms of making some of those government to approve the projects.
Struggling up here. I should have grabbed my water bottle. Thanks. Thanks, Kristen. I just want to say, for us, it was about trying to be transformative. And this is just the start. We're trying to get how governments to rethink how they work, other donors to rethink how they work. And by bringing together a diverse group of projects, we are able to do that.
All right, great, Sarah, thank you. I'm going to ask you all to step down, and I want to invite Liz Nassy, who comes from us with the Indigenous organization Impact from Kenya. I want to invite Simon Lonkopan, who is coming from the Futa Mawitsa project, working with his community in Kurarerwe. And I want to invite Nitaya Arekana from Impact in Thailand. And we're so happy to have you here. We have 7 of the projects represented here at the CBD. And we've been having them all participate in different events. So we're happy to have you all here as part of this panel to talk about your experience with the sub-projects. So Liz, I want to start off with you and share a little bit your experience as Impact in Kenya, and how inclusive conservation is supporting the objectives you have, and how you've been working with the communities.
Thank you, Kristen. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Silakan from Kenya, and I work for a local grassroots organization called Impact. And Impact is one of the beneficiaries, and we are really privileged to be first of the cohort that will be implementing the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. And just a background on what led to this process and how we ended up into this Inclusive Conservation Initiative. Over the last few years, Impact as an organization has been working to secure tenure rights among the indigenous communities of northern Kenya. A process that is not easy if you come from northern Kenya and you know the region, how the land has been shrinking, competing land use initiative around the region. So the priority has always been, how do we secure the land that is already there? How do we make sure that people are comfortable to even talk about the other issues? So most of the work has been around securing the tenure rights for indigenous people. But we also realize that the bulk of the work does not stop there. We need to go deep down and identify ways in which we can already protect the biodiversity within the land. So that's where the initiative, Inclusive Conservation Initiative, is coming in to support indigenous people in strengthening their capacities to really implement their ambitions and aspirations and better define conservation in their own terms, putting conservation measures that are really reflect their day-to-day lives, conservation initiatives that are tailored to respond to their day-to-day needs. And it doesn't have to be conservation per se. We feel like conservation is also a term that has been borrowed from elsewhere. So this particular project will help indigenous communities from Kenya, and specifically the pastoralists from northern Kenya, to really look into conservation in the best way they know. Conservation that is in accordance with their own aspirations and as Indigenous people. Conservation that reflects the current needs of their region specifically, because each region has different needs, different priorities, and different dynamics. So that's how the conservation initiative has played out in this case. And in the next 5 years, we are going to employ a series of interventions in ensuring that this is successful, because we are also taking it upon ourselves as the first GEF beneficiaries that we are going to make it work. We are going to shun those stereotypes that Indigenous people do not have capacities to really handle this funding. We are going to make it work. We are going to put our feet down really and really work to make sure that we can be an example. From now onwards, these processes can be easy, and it will open so many other ways for Indigenous people. So our project will focus in 4 key areas. Number 1 is on really affirming the presence of Indigenous people and local communities in the region. And we are going to look into an ecological zone that is really important to Indigenous people, which is the Ewaso Nyiro River Basin in northern Kenya. It cuts across a number of counties. So we will work in the mid-Ewaso Nyiro ecosystem that has diverse communities, diverse biodiversity, ecological, it's really a diverse ecological zone. So what we are going to do is, number 1, really affirm that this area belongs to the IPLCs. This area belongs to the Indigenous communities. Because if you look at the history, in one of the counties where we'll be working, 40% belongs to a very few individuals, people that did not go back post-independence. So how do we look into those dynamics? This is a region that is really completely different from all the other regions. So we are going to affirm putting down structures that this is entirely Indigenous people's lands. And then after that, we go down into now making sure that it's formally recognized. And how do we do this? We will utilize the available legislations, the government legislation, to make sure that this land is officially recognized, either through the Community Land Acts. There are so many other legislations that are available, but also addressing the historical land injustices. It's high time that we bring these issues out there so that the historical land injustices can be solved once and for all in that particular region. Once we've done that, then we'll go down now into developing land use plans, sustainable land use plans that really reflect our lives as a community. So we'll go down. Most of things have not been documented. The land use, the traditional systems on managing land, biodiversity, most of these are not documented. And that's why we have competing conservation efforts, because everyone is coming thinking, I'm an expert, this is what you intend to do. This is the best way to hold biodiversity loss. This is the best way to revitalize. But I think it's high time we go back and really utilize the traditional knowledge that is there, the rich traditional systems that are already there, to conserve the biodiversity in the region. So that's the other thing that we will do under this particular project, really giving voice to the traditional knowledge, the rich knowledge that is already there, to ensure that the communities are able to utilize in managing the lands for sustainable use. Then finally, we'll be able to monitor and evaluate the progress. Across the 5 years, we'll be working to really monitor and evaluate this progress, documenting it for future generations, and even for other conservation stakeholders. We want it to be a best practice that you can come and learn from what we've been able to do. So it will be upon us to also document, monitor, and constantly evaluate what has happened in terms of biodiversity restoration, in terms of contribution to the global environmental benefits. So constantly we'll be monitoring, and not necessarily to report, but rather to preserve for the next generation, and also as a learning point for other conservation agencies. So we are really privileged to be part of the first cohort that will be implementing this. It's a unique initiative that is finally shifting the power to the Indigenous people and recognizing that indeed Indigenous people can really take the lead in spearheading conservation initiatives that better fits them. conservation initiatives that speaks to their needs. And as I said earlier on, I think this is a task to us as the 9 sub-projects that we are going to set the pace, and we are really willing to set it very high so that it cannot be a question anymore that Indigenous people are not able to take care of fundings and everything, but we'll be equal partners in making sure the ambitions of the willing partners and the ambitions of Indigenous people have a common line. So that's just in a nutshell what we are doing as a project. Is so much more that contributes to the overall objective of ICI. But I'll let my other colleague talk. Maybe we can respond on questions.
So that's a big nutshell. You are, thank you, Liz, for sharing that. And I think, part of it is affirming that role of Indigenous peoples, as you said, and that voice and that knowledge. But I think, by saying, and I think at the end it's important, is that monitoring, right? How that this will be the first, I don't want to say class, but the first initiative in terms of the GEF experience, but also the learning amongst yourselves as an organization in Kenya, but across the projects, but also for conservation organizations. And I love when we get challenged, because we do, and we're trying to transform it together, and I think that's what we agreed upon early on. So I'm going to turn to Simon Lonkopan, who comes to us from southern Chile, and he is working with the project, the initiative Futamawitsa. So first I'm going to ask you to explain what Futamawitsa is, and then also talk about, from your perspective, what this means, especially for an investment in the Southern Cone, which doesn't typically get this type of investment for Indigenous peoples and local communities.
Gracias, Kristen. Mari, los saludo en mi lengua, el mapudungún. Mi nombre es Simón Lonkopan, soy mapuche, del sur de Chile, de la Patagonia, y ha sido un desafío inmenso el poder gestionar, el poder pensar y tomar, ¿no?, este desafío que es la iniciativa de conservación inclusiva. El pueblo mapuche o el contexto de los pueblos indígenas en Chile es complejo. Chile es un país que no reconoce los derechos territoriales de los pueblos indígenas. Chile es un país que no incluye en sus políticas públicas de conservación a los pueblos indígenas. Nos han excluido decenas de años y aún seguimos luchando para poder, de una u otra manera, que nuestros derechos constitucionarios se nos pueda reconocer. En este contexto, nuestras comunidades, la mayoría de las comunidades mapuche, vivimos en el cordón de los Andes. Y dentro de ese contexto, alrededor del 60% de esos sectores son áreas silvestres protegidas, son parques nacionales, reservas nacionales. Lamentablemente, en ninguna de esos parques, en ninguna de esas reservas, las comunidades indígenas, las comunidades mapuches, tienen acceso en la toma de decisiones de esos espacios. Se nos ha negado históricamente. Y en ese contexto, las amenazas extractivas, la minería, la hidroelectricidad, los monocultivos forestales, constantemente ponen en tensión el territorio. Es ahí donde muchas comunidades nos organizamos para hacer un proceso de defensa y resistencia territorial. Cuando logramos hacer esa resistencia, viene la pregunta, ¿y ahora qué? ¿Qué hacemos ahora? ¿Cómo logramos de una u otra manera poder cuidar, proteger, conservar nuestro territorio? Pero con una perspectiva y con un pensamiento propio, mapuche, indígena. Cuando hablamos de conservación, la sociedad entiende la conservación como un cerco, donde muchas personas o pueblos no tienen acceso a esos espacios que son conservados. Nosotras y nosotros hoy planteamos que las comunidades, que los territorios, que las organizaciones locales e indígenas puedan acceder al uso tradicional de esos espacios. En ese proceso, la iniciativa Futamawisa reconoce el concepto de territorio biocultural. Un territorio biocultural tiene que tener bajo este concepto esta lógica de la biodiversidad, ¿ya?, de la naturaleza, pero también los conocimientos y la sabiduría de los pueblos indígenas, donde estos diálogos de saberes entre el conocimiento tradicional y el conocimiento técnico generen proyectos, generen iniciativas que apunten hacia el resguardo y hacia la protección de la naturaleza. En ese contexto desempeñamos y desenvolvimos la iniciativa Futamahuiza, que es parte de la iniciativa de conservación incluyente, que está en proceso de estructuración y que de una u otra manera buscamos fortalecer 4 pilares fundamentales. El primero tiene que ver con una planificación territorial desde las comunidades mapuche. En segunda, inversión en planes de vida y proyectos de comunidad. El tercero, en incidencia en la política pública nacional e internacional. Y un pilar transversal que tiene que ver con el fortalecimiento de las comunidades, el fortalecimiento de las capacidades técnicas y el fortalecimiento también de las autoridades tradicionales de nuestras comunidades, para que de una vez por todas, al menos en nuestro país, nuestras autoridades tradicionales sean respetadas y sean tomadas en cuenta por el Estado, por un país que silencia estas voces y que de una u otra manera, lamentablemente, por la presión extractiva, han sido calladas o han sido muchas veces asesinadas. En ese contexto queremos tomar a Futamahuiza y a esta iniciativa de conservación incluyente como un paso. Queremos tomar estas herramientas para que nuestras comunidades puedan decidir qué queremos como territorio, fortalecer las capacidades y obviamente aumentar considerablemente las áreas de protección de la naturaleza.
Simone, I'm going to push you on one more question. So I think you need to give a little bit of description of what Futamahuiza means and why, because you're talking about a biocultural territory, but it covers 2, what we call countries, but it covers a nation. So if you could give a little bit of description of that, that would be great.
Claro. Uno de los principales desafíos de Futamahuiza es que es una iniciativa que abarca 2 países, ¿ya? Pero una nación. Y eso es algo complejo. Los países históricamente han tratado de separar a nuestros pueblos. Futamahuiza está en Chile y Argentina respectivamente. Y los países y los gobiernos nos han puesto muchas trabas para llevar a cabo esta iniciativa. Sin embargo, logramos ser estratégicos y pudimos levantar una propuesta en conjunto, ¿ya? Con los hermanos y hermanas mapuches de Argentina y con nosotras y nosotros de Chile. Ha sido un desafío porque los gobiernos no entienden y no reconocen que somos un solo pueblo, que somos una sola nación y que sus estados quizás tienen diferentes banderas, pero nuestra gente tiene un solo pensamiento, un solo corazón y que no reconoce sus fronteras.
Thank you, Simone. So I think you've highlighted again, and I think we're seeing the parallels across the projects, the issues of territorial planning, public policy engagement, strengthening of local authorities. So now we're going to continue to travel around the world, and I want to go to Natalia, who is with a consortium of Indigenous organizations, right? You're with Impact, but you're working through a consortium with the Indigenous Peoples Foundation in Kenya. But talk about, one, how it was for you to come together as Indigenous organizations to think about the project, but how that is helping you to move things forward in your discussions in Thailand.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is me, Nitya Yakana. Actually, my name they given by my parents is me, but as he said that the government they try to make people one country, one nation like that. They forced us to change our name to use the Thai name, right? So this is that for us that we not able to use our name that given by our parents. And firstly, I would like to thank for Lucy. You know, I think that she's the leader and to fight and try to raise the voice. And until now, we have today that we can receive the funding from GEF. If we don't have leader like this, the funding they're not able to hear our voice that what happened in the ground level, and they're always thinking that we are something that object that other organization were going to do with us, right? So as indigenous people, we also know that we are experience have been very long experience on being the target for a very long time already, and organization tell us to do. You do that, you do this. This is the work plan that you have to do that. So a long time there we have to follow like that. So I think today is this very good initiative for us to start, and slowly we will grow up, no? And like yesterday we said that after the international organization step up and the outsider or the intermediate will step down. This is the very good initiative we will start now. Yeah, and firstly I would like to say that our organization, Impact Association, it is the Indigenous grassroots organization that was founded by a young graduate student who are involved in the research with the foreign organization. And then they decide to form their own organization because they thought that this is the only thing that they need to do by themselves. Don't need to wait for others to do for you. So that's why our organization was founded for 30 years ago already. And I also one of the products of the organization since my study, you know. So I believe that if you trust to indigenous people, they were able to do the thing that you just support us is to facilitate or coaching. And right now I think that we try to say that the capacity building, or try to use the new word that actually we already have some capacity with us now. So why not we use the term of enhancing the capacity? Because not all the time to develop capacity, we quite boring about this thing, no? But something about enhance our internal capacity and able allow us to use our capacity to do something. So this is the point that we would like to raise out. And according to our project in Thailand now, we combine with 5 organizations. So actually we have the Impact as the organization, we are the Secretariat office for the network of indigenous people in Thailand. This is the national indigenous movement in Thailand, and there are more than 20 grassroots organizations of the indigenous people together. So that's why when we start to develop the concept, all the organizations that support the those movement, we come together and brainstorm to help to develop the concept node together. So this is the starting point for us. And I really like the idea that you give the time for us to prepare for develop the proposal, because normally when they request for the proposal, they're just asking for writing the proposal without any preparation time. But this time, it is very good to have some capacity enhancement, some supporting, technical supporting. So this is very good starting that you provide time for us to prepare. This is very good. And I would like to say that for the term of the Inclusive Conservation Initiative, I think that this term is for, I believe that our organization, all the indigenous organization, we have experience about this issue, because we don't do anything that make conflict for the people or just not need, it is not need of the people in the ground level, but we do something that it is the really need of the indigenous people there. So the first thing that we really need to do with them is to enhance the capacity for them to able to analyze the situation. So if they know what happened in their community, they will know how to go further, how to solve the problem. But if you not allow them to analyze the situation and then you just ask them to do that, to do this, then they will don't know what to do next if the project done, the project end. No? So this is the reason learned that a lot of projects come, and when the project end, everything gone, nothing there, just only the footprint, little bit there is still there. So the first thing is the capacity for them to analyze the situation, and then you just coaching them or facilitate them. This is, you don't need to intervene a lot, but you can see them and be the coaching for them. No? This is very good strategy that our organization we do, and especially we not do by ourselves organization only, but we have networking with the local indigenous group, and they have their own leader mechanism that will supporting the work in the cloud area. So this is very important for us to connecting with the cloud network and organization that in there. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, me, and we'll use me. So I think it's important that you highlight how internally, you came together as several organizations to put together the proposal. I think you highlight something really important that I hear across all the projects is about trust. And I think that the wording around capacity building is important, right? You're using coaching, we're using enhancing. We had an event yesterday where it was talked about a lot, but capacity building or enhancing or coaching isn't just Indigenous organizations or communities. It's also the others as well. You are all right now in the process of your planning grants, right? Having the time to develop the strategy, and you have resources to do that. So why don't you talk a little bit, give me a little bit of insight into the conversations you're having with the communities in preparation for implementation. Liz?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. So before the actual implementation of the Inclusive Conservation Initiative, there was a need to really go back to the communities. We had developed this expression of interest 2 years ago, and there was this need to really go back and see if the priorities still stand. Do the communities still value the initial ideas, the thoughts that were there? And yes, for the last 4 months, we've been re-engaging communities, setting these priorities clear from the grassroots level up as we come to the stakeholders and those relevant departments, and also working with the communities to identify a governance steering committee, a sort of a governance structure that will spearhead now the implementation of the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. So the work has been going on, and specifically re-engaging the communities and really talking about this idea, if it still stands. Can we still go ahead with the inclusive conservation? The priorities are still right. And there's quite a lot of reception, especially from our region. I think it's a timely discussion. Communities are looking forward to leading these discussions. They want to be asked, what is your aspiration in terms of conservation? What do you think about conservation? And they are really looking forward to an initiative that will put them on the forefront. They are really looking forward to really being on the driver's seat, being the one that are designing what conservation ideally is. It doesn't have to mean what we all know, but what responds to the aspirations again. What is conservation today? And not necessarily what is out there, what is happening. And not also competing with any other that is there, but rather coming up with something that really serves their immediate needs now. So work is ongoing. And I think also as the other sub-project, we are now working into feeding the impact strategy that will now shape our next course of action for the next 5 years. So it has been an exciting process with a really good turnout from the communities we are working with. Yes.
So I think yes, and I think we need to remember we're doing this in a post-COVID era, right? Period, somewhat. We'll see what happens after everyone goes home from here. But I think that important is re-engaging with the communities, making sure the priorities are right, and that leadership. So Simone, I'm going to go to you because you have two processes going on. You have the one that's going on with your brothers and sisters in Chile, but you also are meeting with your brothers and sisters who are in Argentina, and that's been a bit of a challenge because of COVID.
De todas maneras, Iniciativa de Conservación Incluyente es algo como magnífico en ciertos aspectos, pero es un desafío muy grande, sobre todo en el contexto de nuestros pueblos indígenas en el sur de Chile, en Argentina, debido a que lamentablemente las políticas y los proyectos desde los gobiernos han sido asistencialistas, donde los gobiernos toman decisiones, donde muchas veces las ONGs toman decisiones, más no los pueblos. Entonces tú cuando tienes que conversar, compartir la iniciativa de conservación incluyente en las comunidades, en las organizaciones locales, es algo difícil de comprender, porque es algo nuevo para muchos pueblos, es algo nuevo para muchas comunidades. Y ese ha sido uno de los principales desafíos, el cómo, en nuestro caso, con Futamahuiza, logramos compartir con más de 50 comunidades mapuches este proyecto, esta iniciativa, y lograr involucrarlas, empoderarlas, porque ese es el objetivo fundamental, que las comunidades logren abrazar este proyecto para lograr una buena gobernanza de sus ideas, de sus proyectos, de sus propias iniciativas. Y esto sumado que al menos en el territorio del cual nosotras y nosotros venimos como mapuche, iniciativas globales como esta no habían sido implementadas. Siempre el pueblo mapuche nunca ha trabajado con iniciativas globales o con grandes agencias implementadoras. Entonces es un doble desafío. Iniciativa de conservación incluyente es la primera iniciativa a esta escala que se desarrolla en nuestras comunidades y estamos trabajando estos meses para lograr un buen proyecto, una buena expresión de interés para que en estos 4 años que quedan logremos que los resultados sean evidentes y generemos indicadores para que podamos de una u otra manera decir que logramos algo, logramos fortalecernos y logramos fortalecer capacidades y fortalecer liderazgos.
Thanks, Simone. I think you make a really good point, is how governments and how NGOs have operated in the past and rebuilding and pushing that governance that communities have had and helping to strengthen that more. So, Mi, I want to go back to you and understand how you're all working together to do in your planning processes with the communities.
Yeah, we have 5 organizations together in Thailand now working in this project. No? So firstly, I think we're talking a lot about the term of the Inclusive Conservation Initiative, translate into Thai and to translate into the easy word that easy to understand and in the same page. No? This is we quite spend time or so. And actually, we 5 organizations also have our different strategy of working. So I would like to share about my own organization that since we have been working with the Indigenous network, individually organized network, no, in the northern of Thailand for more than 20 years already. So they know us, and some of staff we belong to the communities members also. So this is the mechanism that we try to approach to the community, and we are actually in the community, since we are working together for a long time, so we know what happened there, and we already have some plan that they want, they need already. So when the activity that during the consultation, we already know the leader, we really know how to go further with them. So right now we try to work with them to try to negotiation with the local authority, you know, to involve in the preparation process also, in order to get them involved in the very beginning, because to get in the high political level, no, in the country level is quite difficult for us. So the very important thing is we try to include them in the local authority level there, and the process is they already have network there. We don't need to set up, because then the word is there, the people is there. The point is just to orientation, or also to increase the understanding about this project and really analyze the situation again with them. Know what they really want to do, and to in order for them to develop the plan and collect the information. But the other thing that very important is the young people. No, we try to get the young people involved, especially in the collecting of information, because right now we are in the process of collecting information. A lot, 155 communities there, so the staff are not able to go all the community to collect the information. So the young people are very important. They have very important role for us to help supporting for the collecting information, and we really hope that from the involving in the collecting information, there will be more understanding about their own situation in their own community also, and they were aware about that issue, no, and slowly they will get in and become the young leader, the new leader in the future also. Thank you.
Great. So I think it's important what you highlighted. You're focusing in Thailand, translating what the concept of conservation, inclusive conservation is. This project itself is at least working over 4 languages. at a global level, but you are all working in many languages, and that's one thing, that bringing together those concepts, what do they mean? And I think it's important that you highlight in the process that you're working on is that you're utilizing initiatives like inclusive conservation to continue to build on your strategies, and that's what they should be, strategies by and for Indigenous peoples. And then I think the other thing is the challenges that still exist, right? In Thailand, it's difficult, it's a challenge, so you're bringing in local authorities early on so that they are accompanying the process that you're laying out and moving that forward. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to have to continue to look at as part of this process. While we're here, I just want everyone, we have several other sub-projects here, so I'd like to ask all the projects to stand up in here in the room, just as a recognition. So Ramiro, you're here. Before we just transition, I think we need an acknowledgement of all those who are involved in inclusive conservation. All of you stand up. And I think this is really, while we have started, this is really the inauguration of this event. And I want to give everyone, and we have several other leaders here in events, but I want to give everyone a round of applause as sort of this, this effort that they're all taking to move forward. And as we do that, I'm going to ask Simone and Liz and me to step down, and I'm going to ask Ramiro and Sarah to step back up quickly. Okay, yep, okay, you're good? All right, so just before we jump into questions, I think, we've heard from all of the projects, and actually this is the first time they have been physically together. Everything has been done online through translation and trying to meet each other to create community online, and now we're creating community in person. And as the project continues to move forward, they'll get to visit each other's programs and projects. But I go back, Sarah, and we have Ramiro Batsin here, who is also co-chair of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Biodiversity, but also works with, is one of the projects as well with your organization. And, Lucy continues to beat the drum, right? She continues to beat the drum about finance. She just skipped out to go to another event. But so Sarah, I'd like to hear from you, and Claude said it's already in GEF-8, but a little bit about your perspectives of the expectations, and then perspectives on investing in Indigenous leadership.
There we go. Okay, all set. So when I first started really advocating for this program within the GEF, what I said was this is a cost-effective way to protect the global environment. There's a lot of other benefits that come with it about human rights, and I don't want to sound callous about what else is going on, but I said this is very effective. This is cost-effective. This is why we should do it. Land tenure insecurity is a driver of environmental degradation. And so what I'm hoping is that people will really start to see this. As we move to scale, this is starting, we're down the process of some scale from small grants, from those types of things. What happens when we empower and support Indigenous leadership and their initiatives? So we're hoping that governments take this on, say within their larger GEF projects, that other donors and funders they can join us if they'd like. We have a whole list of projects we'd love to share with you, in any other role with that. And so that is what we're hoping to see. And then we're also hoping to see that these organizations become or strengthen their leadership in what they're able to do. They're able to find other sources of finance, whether it's environmental or it's other kinds of organizations or other resources that may be out there through the support that they've had from the inclusive conservation field, things like fiduciary capacity and other kind of more logistical topics. So we're hoping that this goes and grows, and we want to share the knowledge of what is being done. We already have a lot of lessons learned for the next round.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to turn to Ramiro. Ramiro, over the last year, 2 years, we continuously hear about pledges, right? And the GEF had already done this before the big pledges came out related to climate and biodiversity finance. I would love for you to talk about your experience. You are you're an Indigenous organization. You have had experience implementing multilateral and bilateral finance. How have you and your organization adapted to it, and what do you think now with all of this commitments, and how do we get that to action? And Sarah's already pushed the GEF's already stepping up again, but how have you had to adapt, and how do you think others need to adapt?
Bueno, en primer lugar, gracias por la invitación para participar acá. Y uno de los puntos que yo creo que hablar de la cooperación directa para pueblos indígenas es ver a ICI, ya. Realmente es uno de los primeros mecanismos que empieza a brindar, digamos, esa cooperación directa. ¿Y cómo nos hemos adaptado a esto? Yo creo que hay que ver varios puntos, digamos, que las organizaciones tienen que ver. La primera es cómo fortalecer toda esta relación, digamos, política que hay. ¿Ya? Cuando hablo de toda la relación política me estoy refiriendo que hay que tener un diálogo con los estados, ¿sí? Las organizaciones tienen que tener de una u otra manera ese diálogo con los estados, porque la mayor parte de la cooperación en estos momentos está pidiendo que el Estado dé el aval de estos fondos, ¿ya? Y esto puede ser también una limitante si hay organizaciones que no tienen una relación, digamos, de diálogo con el Estado. Y ha sucedido en varios momentos, digamos. La otra parte que hay que fortalecer es esa parte técnica, ¿sí? Toda la burocracia, digamos, todos esos instrumentos, todos esos papeleo, como le llamamos, que hay que formular, no todas las organizaciones tienen la capacidad de hacerlo. Y aquí es muy importante, digamos, tener equipos técnicos indígenas que puedan conocer, digamos, estos procedimientos. Ya antes nosotros escribíamos propuestas y decía alguien, podíamos escribir hasta 80, 90 páginas. Y hoy nos dicen, tiene 100 palabras para llenar y dar su concepto de proyecto. Ya, ese es un reto grande, ¿sí? Y es un reto grande porque nosotros los pueblos indígenas estamos acostumbrados a hablar y hacer todo un proceso y un contexto. Hoy en las negociaciones nos encontramos igual. Nos dan 3 minutos y nosotros queremos 2 o 3 horas para poder explicar un tema. Ese es algo fundamental que hay que verlo. La otra parte que hay que fortalecer es la parte administrativa. Eso siempre lo hemos dicho. La parte administrativa que los estados tienen no está formulada para pueblos indígenas. En Guatemala, por ejemplo, no se reconoce a los pueblos indígenas como tal. Mi organización, cuando quiso inscribirse, se quería inscribir como un centro de investigación y planificación del desarrollo maya, como una organización indígena. Y el Estado nos dijo, puede ser ONG, puede ser fundación, son los 2 mecanismos para que usted se inscriba. Todo el proceso de construcción de nuestra organización por 3 o 4 años la hizo un abogado en 10 minutos. Ya tenía una plantilla, agarró el nombre y dijo, aquí vamos a copiar el nombre y vamos a inscribirlo. Entonces todo ese proceso cambia demasiado y es algo que los pueblos indígenas debemos de empezar a analizar y empezar a ver cómo nos fortalecemos. Segundo, la parte fiscal. Dentro de la parte fiscal, hoy por hoy, los estados, digamos, solicitan las facturas, solicitan las auditorías y todos esos procesos, ¿sí? Que muchas veces no permite que haya una inversión directa en la comunidad, porque en las comunidades no tenemos esas facturas, no tenemos esos, digamos, procedimientos. Para hacer un evento no lo puedo hacer porque la comunidad no me va a dar una factura para dar la alimentación. La comunidad lo que va a hacer es quiere comprar la verdura, quiere comprar la carne y quiere hacer esa hollada, quiere hacer esa comida donde disfrutemos, pero ahora la tenemos que comprar en una capital, ya. Entonces, esas son limitantes que los pueblos indígenas tenemos, ¿sí? Segundo, digamos, sí hay procedimientos. Nosotros hemos empezado a desarrollar mecanismos alternativos, ¿sí? De transparencia y administración de fondos. Sí, por ejemplo, la comunidad no puede brindar una factura, pero la comunidad hace una asamblea, ¿sí? Donde respalda que se hizo el evento, que se hizo el gasto, y son procesos más transparentes, pero que hay que buscarle las alternativas fiscales para poder empezar a conocer eso. Creo que son retos que tenemos, creo que nuestras organizaciones, en este caso las que hemos estado ya hoy en ICI y hemos venido trabajando, han dado ese paso, atender la parte formal de los estados, pero responder a las necesidades de las comunidades. Gracias.
Thanks, Ramiro and Sarah. So I think you make a good point. And I think, as we heard from Simone and Liz and me on this issue, is that it's all of those little pieces that we're trying to tweak. One is supporting or enhancing or coaching communities, either from the organizations themselves or from organizations like CI and others. But then how do you keep turning things so that you become more transparent? So I'm going to stop here. And I want to see if there's any questions we have from the audience. And I know we've had people some run off, but if there's any questions you have for any of the projects here, I think they're willing to ask. Any questions? All right. Well, then we will wrap it up here. I want to give a big round of applause to all of the projects that are here. And then I would love to ask all the projects to come forward and to get a picture as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the interpreters, and please, you're on my far side, and please remember to return your equipment as well.